Okay. So we left off last time talking about one type of market failure. So the rest of the course almost, or at least the next two chapters anyway, chapter 16 and 17, are going to look at cases where the free market doesn't work so hot. So we call those market failures. Now, I've never really liked that word very much, market failures, because I really don't think of the market system, especially being in a classroom setting, that the market necessarily gets an F. You know, I like to think of it as, maybe the market's kind of getting a C. Normally, the market is a straight A student, right? A's across the board, get the efficient type solutions, does a pretty good job of allocating scarce resources to their highest and best use. So I consider the market system to be an A student. But once in a while, you know, if the market system goes out drinking the night before and wakes up and doesn't feel so good, they might not have studied for the test as good as they should have, the market gets a C, right? And it's just kind of average. Maybe even it's possible that they get an F, but it might not completely fail, but it fails to provide that most efficient solution that we've talked about so far this semester. All right, so when does that happen? So market failures can occur. Our first place that we'll look at, or at least mention here, we're going to spend the next two chapters really looking at this, but a lack of information. What economists call asymmetric information. Kind of a fancy word that means maybe the buyer's got more information than the seller, or vice versa, and therefore it's causing an inefficient exchange. So asymmetric information. So let's say you've got a food allergy. Does anybody here have a food allergy? I won't ask you specifically what it is. There's got to be a handful of you, right? So there's a lot of food allergies that have come around. You've got peanut allergies, you've got other things. What is helpful for people with food allergies as they're shopping for food? What do they rely on? The labels, right? Do you think those labels were always there 100 years ago? No. Right? Did it always show the calorie content, all of the ingredients, blah, blah, blah? So in the past, the market for food was inefficient in the sense that somebody with a peanut allergy would go out and buy some products that had peanuts, but it didn't seem like they would have peanuts in them, right? So they would go out and buy that, break out in hives, maybe have to run to the hospital, whatever, get some medicine. Does that sound like an efficient outcome for the marketplace? No. Why? Because there was a lack of information. If the buyer has the same amount of information as the seller of course knew that peanuts were in there. If the buyer knew that there was peanuts in there, the buyer wouldn't have bought it, we wouldn't have had that transaction. We want efficient transactions to come about, so we want there to be as much information on both sides. The internet has helped this problem immensely, right? You guys don't even know any better for the most part. But being able to shop online, see what cars are selling for in different states, see what the prices are, see what the retailer paid for it, the wholesale cost of the product. I mean, there's so much information out there. So that's really helped alleviate a lot of this problem. So lack of information is an issue. That might lead to some government intervention. The market all by itself may not correct itself on its own. It might, but it may not. And especially as we start to get into maybe some health issues where some product might make people sick, then it might be all the more necessary to have some government intervention, maybe in the form of food labels. There are some lemon laws for used cars. there is some stuff called a seller disclosure statement for real estate. That was one that I knew very well when I was selling real estate, the SDS. So before you could sell your home, actually technically before you'd actually make an offer on a home, if you were using real estate agents anyway, the buyer had to sign off on a sheet of paper where the seller had gone through a laundry list of items. Maybe some of you have seen your parents do these if they've sold some homes, but so how's the roof? Does it leak? How's the plumbing? Does it, are there any problems? How's the electrical? How's this? How's that? How's the foundation? Does the basement flood? Blah, blah, blah. Real fine print, a long laundry list of you saying basically everything you know about the property so that we'd avoid somebody, a buyer, going in and say, oh, I love this place because they had put new carpet down and painted the walls and it looked fine on the outside. But 6 months later, when the winter was here and the rain came, the basement filled with water and there was, $10,000 worth of work that needed to be done to fix the foundation. So that was no longer allowed, that you could conceal that. And so we have people sign the seller disclosure statement, and if that happens, if the basement floods, and they can show that you were actually concealing that from them, then the buyer can take the seller to court and have them pay for the basement repair. So we want that information to be on the table. In the market system, we want the price of $130,000 for that home to reflect the true value, even though there might be some estimates of what the buyer thinks it's worth and what the sellers think it's worth. But at least all the material adverse facts about the home have been disclosed if this paperwork trail was followed. All right, so there's a number of ways that there's some good government intervention, I think, in trying to alleviate some asymmetric information under certain cases. All right, questions or comments on that? The SEC with what has to be disclosed for publicly traded companies, all the information that needs to be disclosed. There's just oodles of examples of information disclosure. All right, number 2 is the one that we already started talking about. And that was public goods. Remember, first of all, that public goods are not government purchased goods in econ class. We might generically call them that out in the real world. But public goods take on a specific meaning. And what were the 2 things that are required to call a good a public good? Non-excludable and non-rival. So more than one person can consume it at the same time without influence or impacting another person's enjoyment. Non-rival. Non-excludable, it's hard to keep out non-payers of the goods. So true public goods are non-excludable and non-rival. And so I'll just list one of our examples we had was national defense is kind of a good one, where we can all enjoy the consumption of missiles in our inventory pointed at the bad guys. Simultaneously, we're all enjoying that good. All right. Then the last one that we'll talk about a little bit in this chapter and spend even more time on it in the next chapter is externalities. Externalities. It's kind of a weird word, definitely an econ type of word. Won't even show up on your spell check most of the time. Maybe it's started to be added now, but externalities. So an externality is a positive or negative effect on a third party not directly related to a transaction. A positive or negative effect on a third party not directly related to a transaction. Okay, so I think this week, I'm not sure when, there's the little health clinic going on, and I'm going to get a flu shot. So, does that have any extra effects? I'm taking the flu shot because I don't want to get the flu, and they're giving it to me for free. So for the economist, we can't turn it down, apparently. So I'm going to go get, even though there's a little bit of pain, so the cost is me, there's still an opportunity cost, right? I got to walk over to the thing and maybe sit in line a little bit, and then they come over and they poke me with the needle and get it all done. But I'm going to get a flu shot. Are there any effects, positive or negative, on third parties not directly related to the transaction? It's possible, by the way, people pay for flu shots. Anybody know how much a flu shot runs if you go run to Walgreens? $32. $32. So there's a market for flu shots. So you can decide if you really don't want flu, if you're susceptible. Maybe a lot of times the elderly don't handle getting the flu very well, right? So there might be some reasons to really avoid the flu. So are there any third-party effects associated with that? Brendan, you got your hands up, or it's just a stretch? Who?
I mean, Walgreens and other clinics that would have originally been able to sell the flu shots are losing a market in that case, aren't they?
Well, that is more directly related to the transaction. So there's a number of firms out there, so we're not really thinking in terms of one party not getting the deal, but the actual consumption of the good itself. Rachel?
Maybe like society benefits from the flu not spreading.
Okay. So how about you guys? Has your likelihood of getting the flu gone down because I see you 3 times a week in this class? Has your probability of catching the flu gone down, maybe not significantly, but at least some amount, right?
I guess marginally.
So a little bit for you guys here. So you are a third party, not directly related to my decision to get a flu shot. I'm getting the flu shot because I don't want to get the flu. In doing so, I convey a positive effect to you guys because now your flu chances have gone down. And did you have to pay for it? No. And that's one of the important points. If you had to pay for it, you would be a part of the transaction. But you're not paying for it, right? So that's the third party effect. What's that?
We have to pay to be here, though.
Right? So that transaction is you and your education. Okay?
And if you get sick from the flu shot,
Well, you would have had to pay your education whether or not you got it.
Okay? Well, let's roll with the education. Does the education, Alex, have any third party effects? Why are you here? Are you here to help society out? Or why are you getting an education?
Well, I'm here to help myself out, which will in turn help society.
Okay? How? How are you helping society?
Making money, doing
Okay?
all make money in the future.
Are people who are educated, I'm not saying that you guys have looked at the research, but just tell me your gut feeling, are people who are educated, do they tend to steal more things or less things than those who don't have as much education? Less things, right? Do they tend to cause more crimes in general or less crimes? Less crimes. Right? I think even looking at white collar, blue collar, if you just take the education strata and look at bachelor's degrees, that'll be across the board less in crime. So, you guys are getting your education because you want to get a decent paying job when you get out of here, right? You are directly related to the transaction between you and Ottawa University. You guys made a deal and you do your own thing. But there's some other people that are indirectly benefiting from the education. All right, so these are kind of the third-party effects. The ones we've described are positive effects. The flu shot conveys a positive thing to you. The education conveys a positive thing to other people. Pollution, on the other hand, would be a negative externality. So as you go about producing the, maybe I should get away from the flu shot. As Mountain Dew is being made at the big factory, or maybe it's the plastic bottles being made, then they're kicking out some sort of chemicals into the atmosphere because of the process that they use to form the plastic, right? So that pollution, they're not paying for. They're getting to use the air for free. And so that's causing some harm to some other people, potentially, long-term or short-term. Maybe the fumes are just drafting down to the neighboring houses, and those people are starting to get sick. That's a negative externality. The people who are getting sick weren't necessarily the purchasers of the Mountain Dew. The people who are buying the Mountain Dew and the people who are producing the Mountain Dew are directly related to the transaction. The people who are getting sick are a kind of an innocent third party, not directly related to the transaction. All right, so we'll end up going over some more examples as we work through, but let's just, for now, list kind of the general gist of it here. So an externality can be a positive externality. Positive externality means that there's a benefit to a third party. A negative externality, and I guess let's put down benefit to a third party. Let's do the flu shot and education, for example. A negative externality is a cost to a third party, not directly related to the transaction. Sometimes we call it an external cost. We might go ahead and add that word in there. An external cost, and this would be an external benefit. And the external part meaning that it's outside the transaction. All right, and here we might have pollution. Kind of the classic negative externality. All right, so we're going to do a lot more detail on this. I kind of wanted to put it all up on the board, chapters 16 and 17, so that you got a snapshot of situations where the market doesn't necessarily get us a good solution. So in other words, if Pepsi is going out, cranking out some violent chemicals as they make this, is there too much or too little Pepsi out in our island, out in our society here?
Too much.
Is there too much or too little? Overproduced or underproduced? Probably. So if there's pollution going on, does there end up being too much Pepsi or not enough Pepsi, do you think? A little too much, right? So the quantity that's being generated by the market system of a willing and able buyer and a willing and able seller is cranking out too much Pepsi because the environment's being polluted at the same time. On education, is there too much education or not enough education because of the external benefit? Not enough. So in a free market system, without you guys being able to maybe get some of the benefits you do from the government, which we'll get into later, on some grants and low interest loans and other things like that, we wouldn't have as many people in the seats today as we do, right? So then education wouldn't be getting enough. It would be underproduced. So those are the outcomes that we get in the market when we have these conditions that are existing. And so part of government policy is trying to address these issues. So we can use government intervention. Here you guys thought I was maybe anti-government the whole semester. It turns out I do actually believe in having a government in place. And one of the places is to try to figure out if there's a problem going on, can we correct it? Now, that's sometimes a loaded question, as we found out. How much do we do? Sometimes does the government get involved and they screw it up more than the market was already screwed up? Yes, that, in my opinion, that does happen too. So it's a double-edged sword, but hopefully through some careful analysis we can make improvements to society rather than making it worse. Okay, so I want to create the demand for a public good. I want to create the demand for a public good. All right, so demand for a public good, and let's put it market demand is what I'm doing. Market demand for a public good, which is non-excludable and non-rival, right? Non-excludable, non-rival. So first of all, I want you to recall what we learned in a chapter a long time ago on the market demand for a private good. So if we put three graphs kind of side by side, and we've got Tom's demand and Dick's demand here, and then we've got the market demand, and Tom, Dick, Harry, and 1,000 other people are just, they have their own individual demands for cheeseburgers. So maybe Tom's demand curve looked like this, and Dick's demand curve looks like this. Right? Everybody's different. We learned in the utility chapter that they can have different demands, different elasticities of demand. So I've got Dick's a little bit steeper. Notice that Dick is willing to enter the market at a little bit higher price because he really likes cheeseburgers. So even if cheeseburgers are $12, Dick's still in there, man. He's got to have his cheeseburger. Whereas for Tom, cheeseburgers need to fall down to maybe $8 in order to make any sense for him to get in the market. All right, so then the market demand curve was simply the sum of the both of them. So at a price of whatever this number is up here, let's call it $10. Nobody's buying any cheeseburgers, right? So the market demand curve at that point was 0. Now, I'm just going to pick this, what's called the choke price for Tom, and let's say that's at $6. At $6, Tom's not buying any cheeseburgers, but Dick is buying 3. So in the market, there would have been 3 cheeseburgers. And Dick's the only one that jumped into the market at a price of 3. Now, at a price of 4, Tom jumps into the market, and Tom's demand is kind of elastic, so he's going to jump onto 4 of them. Boom, I'm in. Red meat, bring it on. Dick, on the other hand, was already at 3, but he ramps up to 5 when prices fall to 4. So in the market now, we've got 9. And this is how we created the market demand curve. The market demand curve was the horizontal sum of all the individual demands. The horizontal sum part, you might remember, was just adding up the quantities at each price. At $4, Tom wants 4, Dick wants 5, so the market demand is 9, right? Horizontal summation. All right. So what if we talk about missiles? So what if instead of cheeseburgers, we make this missiles in our inventory? And this is Tom's demand for missiles, and this is Dick's demand for missiles.
Warlords now?
What's that?
So are these warlords now?
No, this is their demand for missiles.
Oh,
These
sorry.
are human beings who live on the island, and they'd like to be protected from the bad guys. And so now what we're trying to decide is how many missiles should we have in our inventory? Should we have 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6? What's the appropriate number of missiles that we should have pointed at the bad guys? So how do we figure that out? What's unique about missiles now that we've switched from cheeseburgers?
It's not for the individual, just the individual.
Not just for the individual. So we got the non-rivalry, right? So they both can share it. So how would we construct the market demand for missiles? So if missiles are priced at $4, which sounds pretty cheap for a missile, so I'm not sure what our units are, but $4 a pound maybe? Okay, so we got $4 worth of missiles. How many is the right amount for society? What's the value of that? Who's going to buy it? Who's going to not buy it? Is Tom going to buy the missiles? At $4? Yeah. Tom would like to buy 4 missiles. He's willing to pay $4 per missile. And Dick is willing to pay some too. Right? So Dick is willing to buy 5. So if Dick buys his amount, what's true of Tom? He gets a bonus one, right? He doesn't need to buy them even, right? So if Dick's in the market, Tom can free ride. So this is called the free rider problem. So if Tom knows that Dick's a gun guy, right? He's big time NRA and loves explosions and missiles and go defense, then Tom can say, well, I know Dick's going to buy it, so I don't need to. He's already buying 5 of them. Why do I need to kick in, right? So that's what economists call the free rider problem. All right, so what is society's benefit of having 4 missiles? So if I go over here and I think about 4 missiles being in our inventory, what is the societal benefit of having 4? How do you determine it?
Scared terrorists? Question mark.
We've got enough information here with their demand curves. What's Tom willing to pay? $4. What's Dick willing to pay for 4? Approximately. 5. All right, so if we've got a linear demand curve, I didn't write this in before, but Tom is willing to pay $5 for 4 missiles. So what's society's benefit of missiles in terms of dollars? In terms of the benefit that people are getting?
People are paying more money for more.
Tom's willing to pay how much? 4. Is he getting $4 worth of benefit for them? We didn't talk about benefit. I didn't write it up here. We didn't draw the benefit curve. What's the benefit curve again? The marginal benefit curve?
Same as the demand.
Same as the demand curve. So the demand curve is the marginal benefit because it reflects the value that each person's getting, kind of the maximum amount they're willing to pay for each additional unit is the demand curve. This is Dick's marginal benefit curve. So what's the marginal benefit to society of having 4 missiles? Who's going to be brave?
Would it just be like 4 units of benefit?
4 units of benefit? Well, Reagan, you're the first one. You get a point. That's not correct. Who else? What is society's benefit of having 4 missiles? We know that Tom's benefit is how much? 4. Dick's benefit is how much? 5.
So would it be 9?
9. Oh my gosh, I can almost see the light bulbs kind of. Bing, 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 bing. Okay, I kind of get it, right? So, because the goods are non-rival, they can both enjoy the missiles simultaneously. They are both members of society, and so at 4 missiles, they're both getting $9 worth of benefit. All right, as they start to consume more missiles here, at 5 missiles, Tom's willingness to pay dropped, right? So each additional missile isn't as valuable as the last one, which makes sense, right? Let's think about it here. We got 1,000 missiles in our inventory. How much more benefit do you get for 2,000 missiles? Maybe. Well, we might have World War III. How about 3,000 missiles? How about 4,000 missiles? How about 5,000 missiles? This is where we start to get into political arguments between possibly Democrats and Republicans, right? How big is too big? How many times can we blow up the world? Do we need to be able to blow up the world 10 times, or should we go up to 6,000 missiles? 7,000 missiles? Like any other good, cheeseburgers, beer, chicken wings, there is diminishing marginal utility to the good. The more and more you consume of it, the less value it adds to you at the margin. That's why this thing's downward sloping to begin with. So at 5 missiles, Tom's only getting $3 of benefit. We already established that Dick gets $4 worth of benefit. So together they get $7 worth of benefit for the 5th missile. And so 7 is somewhere up here. And what we're constructing is the marginal social benefit curve. That is the demand for missiles. That's the demand for the public good. So this is the demand curve. The marginal social benefit curve is the demand curve. Now, for the cheeseburger example, which I purposely didn't draw in here, but remember we had Tom not having any and then both of them entering in. This little dash line here, when we were talking about cheeseburgers, was also the marginal social benefit curve. It was the market demand curve for cheeseburgers, right? But we did it a little differently because the goods were rival in consumption. Dick's consumption of a cheeseburger meant nobody else can consume it. When that changes when we think about the public good. All right, so the marginal social benefit curve is the vertical sum of the individual benefits. So the key point here, the market demand for a public good, which is the marginal social benefit curve. The market demand for a public good is the vertical sum of individual benefits. Individual marginal benefits. The reason we do that is due to non-rivalry. This is due to non-rivalry of the public good. Okay, so if each missile runs $6, let's just assume that the missile, the marginal social cost of a missile is fixed at $6, which again, we could have an upward sloping one, by the way. I'm just kind of making a little simple assumption here. If the marginal social cost of a missile is $6, we start to see what happens with public goods. The free rider problem can start to kick in. Tom's going to be out of the market at $6. Dick would be in the market. And Tom can get a free ride off of Dick on the 3 missiles. The efficient solution for society is over here, where the marginal social cost intersects the marginal social benefit. But we're not going to get to that point, likely, because of the free rider problem, which makes it a good spot for the government now to buy this public good, because they have ways of forcing payment.
Taxes.
Taxes. That leads us into the tax, right? So we can try to overcome the free rider problem by putting you in jail if you don't pay your taxes. So we're going to fund the public good with tax revenue and hopefully get something that's efficient. But that's where we'll pick up next time. We might not get there either.